Emma Morrison stared at the contract spread across her parents' kitchen table, the words blurring through tears she refused to shed. 22 years old, and her life was being sold to the highest bidder like a piece of property. "It's for the best, sweetheart," her mother whispered, though her voice trembled with guilt. "The debt collectors came again yesterday. They're threatening to take the house." Her father couldn't even look at her, his weathered hands shaking as he pointed to the signature line. "Richard Blackwood is a good man, successful. He'll take care of you better than we ever could." Emma's laugh came out bitter and hollow. A good man? The 55-year-old CEO had a reputation for being ruthless in business, cold and calculating in every dealing. She'd seen his picture in Forbes magazine, steel-grey eyes that seemed to look right through people, silver-touched hair that spoke of power and control. "How much?" she asked quietly. "Emma, don't... How much did you sell me for?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, her father's voice cracked. $5 million. It covers everything we owe, plus enough to start over. $5 million. That's what her freedom was worth. What her dreams of college, of choosing her own path, of finding love on her own terms were worth. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, matching the storm brewing in her chest. Tomorrow she would meet the man who had purchased her future. Tonight she would mourn the girl she used to be. Emma picked up the pen with steady hands. If this was her fate, she would face it with dignity. But she made herself a promise. Richard Blackwood might own her circumstances, but he would never own her spirit. The ink dried quickly on the contract, sealing her destiny. The Blackwood Industries building pierced the Seattle skyline like a steel and glass monument to power. Emma stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top floors disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Somewhere up there, her future husband waited. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor felt eternal. Each floor that passed marked another step away from her old life. The receptionist, a polished woman with kind eyes, offered her coffee and a sympathetic smile that suggested she knew exactly why Emma was there. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now," she said softly, gesturing toward imposing double doors. Emma's heels clicked against marble floors as she entered the corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Elliott Bay, but she barely noticed. Her attention was entirely captured by the man rising from behind an enormous mahogany desk. Richard Blackwood was taller than she'd expected, his presence filling the room despite his lean frame. The photographs hadn't captured the intensity of his grey eyes or the way they seemed to assess everything in seconds. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, his silver-touched hair perfectly styled. But there was something in his expression that surprised her. Uncertainty. "Miss Morrison." His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Please, sit." She remained standing, chin lifted in defiance. "I prefer Emma, and I'll stand, thank you." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps even approval. "Very well. I imagine this situation is difficult for you." "Difficult?" Emma's voice rose slightly. "I've been sold like livestock to a complete stranger. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the expanse of his office, two people bound by a contract neither had truly wanted. Richard moved to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city below. Emma studied his profile, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your parents spoke of urgent financial difficulties," he said quietly. "Medical bills, I believe." Emma's defenses wavered slightly. "My younger brother, leukemia, the treatments..." She stopped herself. Why was she explaining anything to this man? I lost someone to cancer once, Richard said, his voice so soft she almost missed it. The helplessness is consuming. The admission hung between them, unexpected and raw. Emma found herself looking at him with new eyes, seeing past the intimidating exterior to something more human underneath. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why agree to this arrangement? You could have any woman you wanted." Richard turned from the window, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. She saw exhaustion there, loneliness, and something that looked almost like shame. "Could I?" He moved to a sideboard and poured himself a glass of whiskey, his movements precise but somehow weary. "I'm 55 years old, Emma. I've spent 30 years building an empire and destroying everything else in the process. Most women see only the money, the power. They want what I can provide, not who I am. And you think buying a wife is the solution." His laugh was bitter. "I think I'm a man who's made more mistakes than I can count, trying to find some semblance of meaning before it's too late." Emma felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she'd expected. This was a man who seemed as trapped by circumstances as she was, albeit in a cage of his own making. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Richard said, meeting her eyes directly. "We try to make the best of an impossible situation." Richard set down his glass and moved to his desk, retrieving a small velvet box that made Emma's stomach clench. But instead of opening it immediately, he held it in his palm like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I want you to know," he began, his voice carefully controlled, "that I have no intention of forcing anything upon you. This marriage, it will be what you make of it. Nothing more, nothing less." Emma's eyebrows rose. "You're paying $5 million for a roommate. I'm paying $5 million to help a family in crisis and perhaps find some companionship in my remaining years." He opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. "This was my grandmother's. She was the only person who ever loved me without condition." The vulnerability in his admission caught Emma off guard. She stared at the ring, its simple elegance speaking of old money and older love stories. "I won't pretend to love you," she said quietly. "I can't. I wouldn't ask you to." Richard's fingers traced the edge of the box. "But perhaps, in time, we might find friendship, respect, maybe even contentment." Emma thought of her brother's medical bills, her parents' crushing debt, the foreclosure notice that had arrived last week. She thought of her dreams, now deferred but not necessarily destroyed. "What would you expect from me? Honesty, companionship when you're willing to give it, help navigating social obligations that come with my position." He paused. "And patience, while I try to remember how to be human again." The last part was said so quietly, she almost missed it. Emma studied his face, seeing the careful control that barely masked deeper pain. Whatever had made Richard Blackwood into the man he was, it hadn't been kind. "I have conditions," she said finally. Relief flickered across his features. "Name them." "I want to finish my education, and I want to work, have my own career." "Done. And separate bedrooms." "Of course." Emma held out her hand. "Then I suppose we have a deal, Mr. Blackwood." 3 weeks later, Emma stood before a full-length mirror in the bridal suite of the Four Seasons, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The wedding dress was exquisite, vintage lace and silk that had cost more than her family's annual income, but it felt like a costume for a role she'd never auditioned for. Her mother fussed with the veil, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You look beautiful, sweetheart, like a princess." Emma wanted to point out that princesses in fairy tales weren't usually sold to pay debts, but she held her tongue. Her parents' relief at their financial salvation was palpable, and she wouldn't taint that with her own complicated feelings. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting the wedding coordinator. Instead, Richard entered, looking devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo. Her mother gasped. It was bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony, but Richard's attention was entirely focused on Emma. "You look," he began, then stopped, something unreadable crossing his features. "I wanted to give you this before the ceremony." He held out a small wrapped box. Inside, Emma found a delicate pearl bracelet, clearly antique and obviously precious. "It was my grandmother's as well," he explained quietly. "She wore it on her wedding day. I thought, if you're willing to wear it, it might bring some happiness to this arrangement." Emma's throat tightened unexpectedly. The gesture was thoughtful, personal in a way she hadn't expected from their business transaction. "Thank you," she whispered, as he fastened it around her wrist. His fingers were gentle, careful not to touch her skin more than necessary. "Emma," he said softly, "if you want to change your mind, even now, I'll understand. The debt will still be paid." She met his eyes in the mirror, seeing genuine concern there. "Are you trying to talk me out of marrying you, Mr. Blackwood?" "Richard," he corrected, "and perhaps I'm giving us both one last chance to reconsider." Emma touched the pearls at her wrist, thinking of the grandmother who had loved him unconditionally. "I think it's too late for second thoughts." The ceremony was small, elegant, held in the garden of Richard's Mercer Island estate. Emma had expected something cold and impersonal, but the setting was surprisingly intimate. White roses and baby's breath arranged among the natural landscaping, string quartet playing softly near the gazebo where they would exchange vows. As she walked down the petal-strewn path, her father's arm trembling beneath her hand, Emma focused on Richard, waiting at the altar. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, but she caught the slight widening of his eyes when he saw her approach. The officiant, a kind-faced minister who seemed to genuinely know Richard, kept the ceremony brief but meaningful. When it came time for vows, Richard's voice was steady but quiet. "Emma, I promise to respect your autonomy, support your dreams, and never ask more of you than you're willing to give. I promise to be honest with you, even when the truth is difficult. And I promise to try to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me today." Emma's own vows were simpler. "Richard, I promise to approach this marriage with an open mind and honest heart. I promise to be a true partner in whatever form that takes, and to give this arrangement every chance to become something meaningful." When Richard slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands were steady, but she felt the slight tremor in his touch. When she placed his wedding band on his finger, she noticed how his breath caught almost imperceptibly. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced. Richard's eyes met hers, a silent question in their depths. Emma gave the slightest nod, and he leaned down to brush his lips against hers, gentle, respectful, over almost before it began. But in that brief contact, she felt something unexpected: warmth. As they turned to face their small gathering of guests, Richard offered his arm. "Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured. "Emma," she corrected softly. Still, just Emma. His smile was small but genuine. "Emma, then." Richard's estate was even more impressive up close than it had appeared from the ceremony garden. The house itself was a masterpiece of Pacific Northwest architecture, stone and timber and glass that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. As their car wound up the circular drive, Emma caught glimpses of manicured gardens, a tennis court, and what looked like a small vineyard. "It's beautiful," she admitted, as Richard helped her from the car, her wedding dress rustling in the evening breeze. "It's too big," he replied quietly. "I bought it thinking I'd fill it with—" He trailed off, but Emma could guess. A family, children, a life that had never materialized. The interior was just as stunning. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the view of Lake Washington, artwork that belonged in museums. But despite its beauty, there was something lonely about the space, as if it were waiting for life to fill its elegant rooms. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, greeted them warmly and showed Emma to her suite on the second floor. The rooms were spacious and beautifully appointed, with a sitting area, walk-in closet, and bathroom that was larger than her childhood bedroom. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. "Mr. Blackwood's suite is at the other end of the hall," Mrs. Chen explained tactfully. "He wanted to ensure you had privacy and space to make these rooms your own." After Mrs. Chen left, Emma stood alone in her new bedroom, still wearing her wedding dress, feeling utterly displaced. Through the walls, she could hear the faint sound of classical music. Chopin, she thought, coming from Richard's direction. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Emma?" Richard's voice came through the door. "I wanted to let you know that dinner will be served whenever you're ready, no rush, and that there are some things we should discuss about the household routine, staff, that sort of thing, when you're comfortable." "Give me 20 minutes?" she called back. "Of course. I'll be in the study." As his footsteps faded down the hallway, Emma realized that despite everything, she felt safe here. Whatever Richard Blackwood's flaws, whatever had driven him to this unconventional arrangement, he was keeping his word about respecting her boundaries. Emma found Richard in his study, a book-lined sanctuary that felt more personal than the rest of the house. He'd changed from his tuxedo into dark slacks and a cashmere sweater, looking more relaxed but somehow more vulnerable without the armor of formal wear. He was standing before a wall of photographs, his expression distant and melancholy. Emma approached quietly, curious about this glimpse into his private world. The photos told a story of a life lived in chapters. Young Richard with an elderly woman who must have been the grandmother he'd mentioned. Richard in his 20s, arm around a beautiful dark-haired woman whose smile seemed to light up the frame. Richard receiving various business awards over the years, but always alone, his smile never quite reaching his eyes in the later photos. "She was lovely," Emma said softly, indicating the dark-haired woman. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, she was. What happened?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I happened. My ambition, my need to prove myself, my inability to put anything before business success." He turned away from the photos. "Shall we have dinner?" The dining room could have seated 20, but Richard had arranged for them to eat at a smaller table by the windows. Mrs. Chen had prepared something elegant, but not overly formal. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, a wine that probably cost more than Emma's monthly grocery budget. "Tell me about your brother," Richard said as they ate. "The treatments. How is he responding?" Emma was surprised by the question, by the genuine interest in his voice. "Better, actually. The new protocol seems to be working. He's going to be okay. That must be an enormous relief for your family." "It is." She studied his face. "You really did lose someone to cancer." Richard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "My business partner, my closest friend. We built the company together from nothing. And when he got sick," Richard set down his fork, "I was so focused on keeping the business running, on maintaining what we'd built, that I missed most of his final months. I told myself I was honoring his legacy, but really, I was just afraid of watching him die." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. "I'm sorry," Emma said quietly. "So am I." Over the following weeks, Emma began to settle into the strange rhythm of her new life. Richard left early for the office and returned late, but he always asked about her day, always listened with genuine attention when she spoke about her online classes or her volunteer work at the children's hospital. He was unfailingly polite, respectful of her space, but Emma began to notice small kindnesses that spoke to a thoughtfulness she hadn't expected. Fresh flowers appeared in her room weekly. Not roses or anything romantic, but cheerful daisies and sunflowers that brightened the space. Her favorite tea appeared in the kitchen pantry without her having mentioned it. When she expressed interest in the piano in the music room, sheet music for pieces she'd mentioned loving appeared on the bench. "You don't have to do these things," she told him one evening as they shared their now customary dinner. "Do what things?" Richard asked, though his slight smile suggested he knew exactly what she meant. "The flowers, the tea, the music. We agreed this was a business arrangement." Richard set down his wine glass, considering his words. "Perhaps I'm discovering that I'm not as good at purely business arrangements as I thought I was." Emma felt something flutter in her chest, not quite attraction, but something warmer than mere gratitude. "Richard, I don't expect anything in return," he said quickly. I like seeing you smile. It's been a long time since there was genuine happiness in this house." That night, Emma lay awake, thinking about the man she'd married. He was nothing like what she'd expected, not the cold, calculating businessman from the magazines, but someone who seemed to be rediscovering his own humanity through small acts of kindness. When she finally fell asleep, it was to the sound of Chopin drifting down the hall from Richard's room, and for the first time since her wedding day, she didn't feel quite so alone. The next morning, she found a note with her coffee. "Thank you for bringing music back to this house. R." Emma stared at the note for a long time, something shifting in her chest that felt dangerously like affection. Emma was arranging flowers in the front hall when she heard raised voices from Richard's study. The door was slightly ajar, and though she didn't mean to eavesdrop, the intensity of the conversation made her pause. "Won't tolerate this kind of disruption to our operations," a harsh male voice was saying. "Your personal life is affecting business, Richard." "My personal life is none of the board's concern," Richard replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It is when it involves questionable decisions. Marrying some girl young enough to be your daughter? The press is having a field day. Investors are asking questions." Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. She started to move away, but Richard's next words stopped her cold. "Emma is my wife, and she deserves your respect. If the board has concerns about my leadership, they can address them directly with me, but they will not disparage her. This isn't like you, Richard. You've never let emotions cloud your judgment before. Perhaps that was the problem." The conversation continued, but Emma had heard enough. She slipped away quietly, her mind reeling. Richard was defending her, protecting her reputation even when she wasn't there to hear it. The realization did something strange to her heart. That evening at dinner, she could see the tension in Richard's shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Difficult day?" she asked gently. Richard's smile was strained. "Nothing I can't handle. The board meeting didn't go well." His fork paused. "You heard?" "Some of it. I'm sorry if marrying me has caused problems for you professionally." Richard set down his utensils and looked at her directly. "Emma, you are not a problem. You are not something I need to apologize for or explain. If the board can't understand that, then perhaps it's time for some changes." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Emma's breath catch. When had this stopped being just a business arrangement for him? When had it stopped being just that for her? "Richard," she began, but he held up a hand. "There's something you should know. Something I should have told you before." Emma's stomach clenched. "What?" "The reason I agreed to this arrangement. It wasn't just loneliness. Richard stood and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the darkening glass. Emma waited, her heart hammering against her ribs, sensing that whatever he was about to reveal would change everything between them. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with a heart condition, he said quietly. Cardiomyopathy, progressive. The doctors gave me limited time. Emma's world tilted. How limited? 2 years, maybe 3 with treatment. Richard's voice was matter of fact, but she could hear the carefully controlled emotion underneath. I realized I was going to die alone, with nothing but money and regrets to show for my life. When your father approached me through mutual business contacts, it seemed like an opportunity for both of us. You're dying. The words came out as a whisper. We're all dying, Emma. I just have a more specific timeline. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. How could you not tell me this? How could you let me marry you without knowing? Richard turned to face her, and she saw the pain he'd been hiding behind his composed exterior. Because I was selfish. Because I wanted these months, however many I have left, to mean something, to not be completely alone. That's not selfish, that's, Emma struggled for words, that's heartbreaking. I don't want your pity. Good, because that's not what I'm offering. Emma moved closer to him, her initial shock giving way to something fiercer. I'm angry with you for not trusting me with the truth, but I'm not going anywhere. Richard's carefully maintained control cracked slightly. Emma, you don't understand. You could be free in 2 years. You could have a real life, a real marriage with someone who can give you decades, not months. Maybe I don't want to be free. The words surprised them both. Emma reached out tentatively, covering his hand with hers. Maybe I want to be here with you for whatever time we have. Richard stared down at their joined hands, his breathing unsteady. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that somewhere in the last few weeks, this stopped being just an arrangement for me, too. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Richard's eyes searched Emma's face, looking for doubt, for the regret he was certain would come. Emma, he said softly, I'm 55 years old. I'm sick. I've made more mistakes than I can count, and I've hurt everyone I've ever cared about. You deserve so much more than what I can offer. Emma stepped closer, close enough to see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years of carefully controlled emotion. What if I don't want more? What if I want this, you here now? What if I want to help you remember what it feels like to be loved unconditionally, the way your grandmother loved you? Richard's breath caught. You don't love me. Maybe not yet, Emma admitted honestly. But I care about you. More than I expected to, more than I thought possible when this started. And I think you care about me too. I do. The words came out rough, like they'd been torn from somewhere deep inside him. More than I should, more than is wise. Emma reached up and touched his face gently, feeling him lean almost imperceptibly into her palm. Then why are we fighting this? Because I don't want to hurt you. Because when I'm gone, when you're gone, I'll grieve. I'll miss you. But I'll also have had this time with you, and that will be worth it. Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. Don't you see? You're not taking anything from me, Richard. You're giving me something I never expected to find. Richard closed his eyes, his hand coming up to cover hers, where it rested against his cheek. I don't know how to do this. It's been so long since I let anyone close. Then we'll figure it out together. When Richard opened his eyes, Emma saw something she'd never seen there before. Hope, fragile and tentative, but real. Are you sure? He whispered. Instead of answering with words, Emma rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. This time, Richard kissed her back. The weeks that followed were a revelation for both of them. Richard began coming home earlier, and their dinners stretched longer, filled with conversation that ranged from business to books to dreams they'd thought long buried. Emma started joining him in his study in the evenings, reading while he worked, their comfortable silence speaking of growing intimacy. The physical distance between them gradually diminished. A hand on a shoulder became fingers intertwined during their evening walks through the gardens. Separate bedrooms remained, but they began falling asleep together on the couch in the library, Emma's head on Richard's shoulder as he read to her. "Tell me about her," Emma said one evening, curled against his side as rain drummed against the windows. "The woman in the photograph." Richard's hand stilled in her hair. "Sarah. We were together for 5 years. I thought we'd have forever to figure things out. What happened? I was building the company, working 18-hour days, missing dinners, cancelling plans. She said, I loved my ambition more than I loved her." Richard's voice grew quiet. She was right. Emma tilted her head to look at him. "Do you regret it?" "Every day, but especially now when I understand what I lost." His fingers resumed their gentle stroking of her hair. "She would have liked you." "How do you know?" "Because she always said I needed someone who would call me on my nonsense and refused to let me hide behind my work." Richard's smile was soft and sad. "She would have said you were exactly what I needed." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I could have met her. I wish you could have too. I think she would have approved of this, of us." That night, for the first time, Richard walked Emma to her bedroom door and kissed her goodnight. Really kissed her, with tenderness and growing passion that left them both breathless. "Emma," he whispered against her forehead, "I think I'm falling in love with you." "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered back. 3 months later, Emma woke to find Richard's side of the bed empty. They'd been sharing a bedroom for weeks now, their relationship having evolved into something neither had expected, but both treasured. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed different somehow, charged with possibility. She found him on the terrace, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. He looked peaceful, younger somehow. The lines of stress that had marked his face when they first met, softened by happiness. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," he said without turning around, a smile evident in his voice. "Good morning, husband," she replied, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind and pressing her cheek to his back. Richard covered her hands with his, leaning into her embrace. "I have something for you." He turned in her arms and pulled out a small, wrapped package. Inside, Emma found a key, old-fashioned, ornate, beautiful. "What's it for?" "The music room. I had the piano tuned. I thought you might like to play for me sometime." Emma's throat tightened with emotion. The gesture was so perfectly Richard, thoughtful, generous, focused entirely on her happiness. "Play for me now?" he asked softly. They went inside together, and Emma sat at the beautiful grand piano, her fingers finding the keys of a piece she'd loved since childhood. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same composer whose music had drifted from Richard's room during her first lonely nights in the house. As she played, Richard sat beside her on the bench, watching her hands move across the keys with an expression of wonder and love that took her breath away. "I love you," he said, when the last notes faded into silence. "I love you too," Emma replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. They both knew their time was limited, that the future held challenges and heartbreak. But in that moment, surrounded by music and morning light and the kind of love neither had thought possible, they had everything they needed. Richard Blackwood had bought a wife to ease his loneliness, and instead found his heart. Emma Morrison had been sold into marriage, and instead found her home. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected ways.